Yeah, let's do it.
This week's topic is, what is it? Greatest all-time top
Top
five
five.
shooting guards series two, or what is it? Part two of our five-part series, surely, as we break down the all-time players in positions. Is that correct?
That is the ambition for this one.
And like you said last week, having a look at the stats and I guess the options, I guess in this week's, it could be it feels a little bit narrow, perhaps, limited maybe. But I don't know. I guess
Top,
we'll see how we
it's
pick.
top heavy. It's top heavy. I feel like we should be in agreement for 1 to 3, and then 4 and 5 is where any discussion could come out of. That's my early impression.
So, would you like the pleasure of starting with number five?
You started number 5 last week? Is that correct? You
Uh,
started with the
I think
bad
so.
pick of Isaiah Thomas,
We're taking
which was
turns,
just
yeah.
already. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Sorry, bad pick. Did you say bad pick? Oh,
It
oh,
was a hot
oh,
take. It was a hot take.
okay.
All right. So with number 5, I have went with Allen Iverson. So obviously a bit of a culture change to the NBA. Obviously one of the better players at his height. I think one of the weird things about his legacy that really doesn't get discussed is that the Lakers were poised to be the first team to ever go 16-0 in the playoffs, and it was legitimately Allen Iverson who stood in the way of that. He doesn't have the accolades of anyone else on the top 5 list, but I just think in terms of influence, I think in terms of ability, just legacy, whatever phrase you want to attach to him, he's an important piece of NBA history and deserves to be a top 5 shooting guard.
I love Allen Iverson. I named my child after Iverson. Let's be clear. I I I don't even think he's a shooting guard. Do you classify Iverson as a shooting guard? He
So the
was
way
he
that I
was
did
he was the
this,
player that had the ball in his hands predominantly. I don't know what his usage rate was, but obviously, the ball was
was
the,
high.
the offense was obviously designed to have the ball in his hands. I have always classified Iverson as a point guard, maybe a shoot first point guard, but not a shooting guard.
So I've obviously went off Basketball Reference for this one. He is a combo guard, so there have been seasons where he did start at point guard, and there's been seasons that he started at shooting guard. Now, the reason why I settled on shooting guard was because 1998 until 2004, so obviously his big run in Philly, he was listed as a shooting guard for that, and then still teetered. So it's probably a 60-40 split of the shooting guard, point guard, but that's how I did it.
Well, since I love Iverson so much, I won't pick nitpick your choice there too much. But I don't know. I think you only got 4 more spots left. This could be interesting. Like, how many rings did Iverson win?
It was a asterisk 0.
I beg you. What's the asterisk for?
Well, he made it to the finals, which not everyone does, and he played very well and was clearly outmatched in that series. And it's you look at the New Jersey Nets when they had to go up against the Lakers as well. It's just one of those unfortunate things where, like, in any other year, they probably do win the championship, but unfortunately, there's another team that just is better than them. Similar to Golden State phenomena over the last 5 years, and LeBron in the East.
So as great as Iverson was as a pound for pound player, what makes him all-time top 5? Besides one MVP season where he pushed the Lakers and took that game off them in the finals, and he scored a lot of points. What else exactly did motivate you to pick him at 5?
Well, I'm confused as to what you interpret a shooting guard needing to do. I believe that you look at the positions on a court. A shooting guard technically is supposed to be your most potent scorer, and there's not a lot of players that are more potent at scoring than Allen Iverson.
Well, then based upon that, Steph Curry is a shooting guard.
No, but Steph Curry starts at point guard more than Allen Iverson started at point guard. This is going to be the same issue when we do small forward and there's tweeners, right? Like Kevin Durant's a good example, right? And even LeBron currently, right? Even though we know small forward, they have played other positions at times. They've started a lot of games there.
All right, look. Well, number 5 on my list was not AI, obviously. Number 5 on my list is a player that has a career averages here of 19 points a game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, shoots 7 threes a game and makes 3 of them per game. He's got how many rings? He's got 3 rings. He's got 3 rings. Rings are important. I think I rate rings. Okay, and he's still an active player, and he probably could have more rings. Asterisks. Okay, Klay Thompson. All right,
Yes.
I think Klay Thompson is at the moment number 5 in the all-time shooting guards because the guy can shoot. You just sort of
Correct.
said that the shooting guard position is a player that goes out there, shoots and scores and gets buckets, and he's potentially, first or second. You could say Curry's a better shooter than him. Maybe you can argue that one, but he's all-time one of the greatest shooters out there. He can play off the ball. He can, he wins. He gets buckets. He obviously, he can shoot the 3 ball, which is obviously critical in today's sort of game. And you can't forget that he scored like 60 points in a game, 37 in a quarter. Okay, these are things that stand out. These are things that, like McGrady scoring 13 points in 30 seconds. They're the sort of things that stand out. That sort of his legacy will be forever. People will be looking at that clip in 20 years' time and going, "Who the hell was this kid?" Scored 39 points in 12 minutes. Just couldn't miss that sort of game. So I got Klay Thompson at number 5.
It's a beautiful segue because I have Klay Thompson at number 4. Obviously valuing those rings a little bit more. Yeah, look, there's so much praise you can give to Klay Thompson. I think the interesting thing about Klay Thompson is how different is his career if he's not on Golden State? And it's not to say that it's worse. There's a strong case to be made that he probably would be a 25-point scorer because that's his level of potency and that's his level of efficiency.
And no rings.
Well, maybe, but that is the point. But does any player really? How many players have we had in our league that legitimately, wherever you put them, probably end up winning a ring at some point? That is a lot rarer than needing a couple of people around.
So you're saying now, if the K-Love for Klay Thompson trade went down, that Minnesota has a ring and a championship?
No. That's what I'm saying. Neither of those two players are pendulum swingers, right? Like, they have strong impact on their team, but we're talking like a Giannis can clearly win a championship and have things put around him. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, LeBron James, Larry Bird. Like, there are players that you put them on a team, it probably went out eventually after 10, 15 years. Like, that's loosely articulating it. Klay Thompson, I don't know if he has that level of impact, but he's incredibly potent, as you referenced. Some very impressive scoring stats, limited dribbles, limited time.
He's the shooting guard that you sort of you want on any team. I think that's the key, isn't it? So
yeah.
Well, I guess we can't disagree that we both think Klay is top 5 players. That's great, but that means you're leaving out my number 4. That means you're leaving out my number 4. I'm gonna give you some stats. I just gave you the stats for Klay, and these stats exceed Klay's on a per 36-minute basis for pretty much. All right, so 19 points a game. All right, 5 assists. All right, 5 rebounds, 2 steals a game on a per 36-minute basis here. His career stats actually look quite pedestrian, I guess, at when you take that sort of per 36 minutes away at about 13 points a game, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. But again, winning is critical, and this player here, which your player already figured out, is from the Spurs, is Ginobili. Ginobili, I think, is an all-time shooting guard. I put him at number 4 because you put the asterisk there. What could Klay average if he was on a team where he was a number 1 piece, and you're saying maybe 25 a game? What could Ginobili have done if he even started? What could he have done if he had played like 30, 35 minutes a night, where many players were playing in that sort of era, in the early 2000s, versus playing 20, 25 minutes off the bench, but again, playing a role and playing and winning, obviously succeeding in that role, and ultimately making those sort of sacrifices for the resume that he has. I think he's definitely an all-time shooting guard. And looking at his obviously achievements too, when I was googling that sort of stuff, he's got the Euro Championship too. So I guess we're talking all time here, yeah. So he's won in Europe. He's come over to the States. He's won. He's sacrificed his game, and no one's ever said he can't play. He just was asked to come and play off the bench, and that's what Pop did, for him, I guess, and that's how that team was, structured for many years in that dynasty. And he did it as a professional.
I think, look, here's the thing. This is where I would disagree with you. I think you should have flipped Ginobili and Thompson, right? Because I think the 5th spot was pretty loose, but you look at Thompson with an active career and already top 5, I think you can acknowledge that he probably ends up 4 or even 3, depending on how things play out. Ginobili, I would classify him as a Draymond Green type of player. Draymond Green is successful because he's on the Golden State Warriors, and Ginobili was successful because he was on the Spurs. I don't know if he has the same career if he's not on the Spurs, and he might have averaged more, but he's not gone up to 25 points a game. And
so you don't think Ginobili would average 20 plus points a game if it was on a team and it was the number one option? I think he would. I think he would.
I was thinking when you were listing the averages, I was trying to figure out a couple of players that you could have put in. So like Ray Allen was in consideration, I think, at some point, and you could make a case and say clearly played a role, had his superstar period, and then went to Celtics and Heat respectively to do some stuff. Even T-Mac, if we're trying to go for depending on if he's small forward or shooting guard, you got some stuff there. Ginobili's an interesting one. I don't feel as bad about my Allen Iverson pick because at least he was influential and, has legitimate threads through the game and, pretty iconic. And as you said, the whole YouTubing 20 years later and knowing who this guy is, like people still know who Iverson is in this day and age. So I think that holds up better than Ginobili will.
I don't know if the whole country of Argentina will agree with you, but I'm not in Argentina, so I can't.
You're right.
I can't cast that vote right now. Okay.
I guess all time in Argentina, maybe Ginobili's not even number 4. He's a little bit higher. Who knows? I'm going to transition to number 3, and I'd be quite shocked if we deviate from here on out. I've went with Dwyane Wade. So obviously the 3 championships and kind of, 2 sides of the coin here, had the solo superstar run, with the 2006 finals and had the streak just there. And then obviously played a little bit more of that beta role with the Heatles in a sense and had a bit of career longevity. And, the reason why I highlight that is because he had ongoing knee issues. That was no surprise. But the amount of games that he's played, let me just pull up the tab real quick. He played 1,054 games, averaged 22, 4, and 5, shot 48 from the field, never had a 3-point shot, but still got it to about 29.3. I just think I think clearly talented, clearly very talented, and injuries hold his career back from being even better than it was.
D Wade is obviously at number 3 for me. It's I think like you said, our top 3 are probably going to align here. I guess when I was looking at these, I was trying to think, would you put anyone else at 3? And you're right, he had this sort of 2 sort of eras of his career, pre-LeBron, and then when LeBron came along and joined the Heat, and then he sort of finished off his career flow, bouncing around a bit, went to Cleveland as well, if you remember that, and then came back to the Heat. So I guess, look, definitely all-time top 3. I think the thing that I was thinking about Wade was that would we rate him that high if LeBron never came to Miami? That's an interesting one to consider. Would they? He would have obviously been a LeBron rival. They wouldn't have been teammates. And then you would then make an argument if he didn't win any more rings after obviously Shaq left and that first ring where he really carried the Heat and sort of came back and beat the Mavs. Would we rate him so high? Because let's be clear, any teammate of LeBron so far, except if you're Russell Westbrook, is obviously going to really make your career look a little bit better, I think, and especially in the winning department as well.
Glad that the first episode that we ever filmed hasn't made it onto the page yet.
Yeah, that
is aging. That is aging like milk in the sun right now. That is not looking good. I'll be honest. Like all of my arguments just keep like all of my stat shit is just going down.
I'm gonna save that one to upload down the track as a future.
That's gonna be an anniversary edition.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, you make a really good point with the whole. If LeBron doesn't go there, where does he go? I think playing with that hypothetical, he would probably go down to number 5. He'd take over the Allen Iverson spot for me because recognizing the championship, having that shorter stint. But it'd be interesting to see who bumps into that category. I guess another consideration during this was James Harden, not because of his playoff success, but just some of the regular season stuff that he's done was quite influential. There's rule changes, and you have to sometimes recognize that a rule change for a player is therefore an impactful player, whether it be positive or negative.
Harden has no rings. Harden has no rings,
and that's the biggest issue on that one is and it doesn't look optimistic at this point either. So,
and then he's got his his pouty sort of moments as well, right? So I think that's where he's at the moment.
He's not happy. He's not playing. All right, that's really it. He
The,
just has
the other
not
one
up
that
and down
had to
the
be
court.
considered, I think, in the top five, you mentioned Ray Allen, obviously T-Mac, yeah, VC, could be considered somewhere there, but again, no rings. He had a great career. Obviously, really kept the game going when Jordan retired, and his dunks and the 2000 All-Star game, and that was like really put the NBA on the radar. I think when he sort of went out there and went between his legs, and that was crazy. Yeah. So Reggie Miller, but the other one is Joe Dumas. Joe
Yeah, yeah,
Dumas
yeah.
obviously did win rings. He did win rings. All these other names did not win rings. Okay, besides Ray Allen. Okay, so
Yeah.
which was really, I did look at his stats, and it was a consideration. Maybe Joe just fails my eye test because I never really watched him play that much. That's
And I'd
all.
probably liken Joe similar to your Ginobili pick as well. I think a part of a very good team, but not necessarily the driving factor of that, so to speak. So,
Number two, I know who you're going to say. Just
I mean, the last two have to be pretty obvious, right? So number two is obviously Kobe Bryant. 5 rings. Two two aspects of his career in a sense, with the number change kind of corresponding with how he approached the game, being very athletic at the start, obviously having Shaq for the start of the career, and then transitioning to his own team, getting Powell, um, just kind of the legacy behind it as well. I think I think he got a really bad rap for imitating Michael Jordan, or a lot of people putting that moniker on him that he was the next MJ, but in a very weird way, he did do some copycat things, and he did basically was the next MJ, but he did it in a really original sense. He was copycatting someone, but it was still his own version of a copycat, and you kind of had to respect the fact that he was Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan was a separate player, regardless of how many similarities you could draw.
Oh, look, absolutely. And you know what? Dwayne Wade, Kobe, and MJ stats, and I guess we're agreeing MJ's number one, right? There's no debate at shooting guard.
I
That
mean,
that
spoilers,
that
but yes.
yeah, that we're all quite similar to a certain extent. The biggest point, I think, the difference really was MJ scored the most out of them. Kobe scored about 25 points a game. Obviously, took him a while to really settle into
Into the
pro
league,
league. I
yeah.
guess he didn't start when he first came in. He obviously was at 18, I think, or 17 even when he was drafted or whatever. And he was like, it took him a while to get going, but once he got going, obviously, he really sort of became a superstar. Clearly, obviously, his stats, he's at average just under 5 assists a game. I think a bit of Kobe's game, like you said, that got that stigma was like the guy doesn't pass. Yeah, and the guy average 5 assists a game pretty much, so he definitely, wasn't as much as a sort of a black hole there in a sense that everyone sort of portrayed him to be. I think, at the end of the day, Kobe, has so many sort of memorable moments. I think
Yeah.
it's, in all honesty, you could almost argue Kobe has more memorable moments than Jordan, you know, um, you know,
Well, yeah,
I,
because what you're doing is you're comparing team greatness versus individual greatness. And MJ's individual greatness was still on display on a good team, but there was some dark periods for Kobe there where that team was bad, and he just, drops 81 in a game and averages 50 for 4 straight games, and just does some crazy things. Um, and like also to comment on the assisting as well, sometimes assists are a byproduct of the system that you play in, and obviously the triangle offense is essentially designed that the ball is consistently moving, but if it does reach a target player, which Kobe was the target player, he is supposed to shoot it. And if he's not supposed to shoot, he's supposed to go to work at the ISO. And we sometimes, I think assists are really funny as well, because we look at certain players and we say you should pass more, but his level of expertise with scoring, why would you want him to pass more? Like, it just didn't, he's averaging 25. He was, and I think the other thing as well, as someone who's a Phoenix Suns fan and essentially watched that man destroy a lot of our title chances throughout the years, that's a fearful player, right? That's a player that when he's got the ball and it's the last, minute of the game, you definitely want to watch it because you will probably see something cool, right? And even though statistically speaking, he's missed a lot of shots because everyone missed a lot of shots in the clutch, it's just, it doesn't weigh on him the same way. And it's funny, right? Because you hear all these stats about LeBron being more clutch than Kobe, right? There was all the LeBron pretenders, sorry, the LeBron supporters basically saying, he actually shot better in the clutch than Kobe did. But why does Kobe have that memory, that imprint on people? And I think it's just, it's how he also made people feel. Stuck with LA the whole time. I was very fortunate. I actually got to see him play in person. It was just a close game against Sacramento. But it's just unreal. He put up I think 32 points in that game, and it was just 32 points in an NBA game, 16 years into your career on a bloody Thursday night.
Well, he did drop 60 in his last game, didn't he?
Yeah, dropped 60 off 50 shots. Off 50 shots, man. I feel like if you gave me 60
don't worry
shots,
about that part. And they won. All right. So they won.
That was the bigger deal.
You can shoot as much as you want if you win, right? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No one
If
cares
they had
how
lost,
much
it
you
would have
shoot.
been bad. Yeah.
Okay, but look, here's obviously MJ's number one. Yeah, and we could do a whole podcast on MJ, why is number one potentially. I've always said, as you probably heard before, that 6-0, has never lost in the finals, 6 final MVPs. Clearly, he was a prolific scorer, and obviously had 2 3-peats that sort of really just summed it up. And then he was unbeatable. Players stepped on the court and were fearful of playing him. Was sort of the era that he was in. And so many great players were all denied a ring in those years when he was playing, because he was his will to win, and the system around him and the supporting cast around him were all the right pieces. So, I think here's the question I was going to ask. Kobe went 5-2, yeah, I think in the finals. 5 rings with, obviously they lost to the Detroit Pistons when they had the Karl Malone and GP come across in that season. I think they also lost to Boston.
To the Celtics.
I think, yes, to the Celtics in that sense. Would Kobe have surpassed Jordan if he had won one of those rings?
No. Only because, okay, so for example, I pulled up the stats because you were talking about it. So Kobe averaged 25 on, let's just go 48% from the field.
So if Kobe went 6-1, you're saying he would not be potentially better than Jordan?
Basically, Jordan played 300 games less and averaged 5 points more. He averaged a whole rebound more, and he averaged half an assist more, and he also shot 5% better. He essentially shot 50%. Like, the issue with that would be we're counting the rings as more important than everything else, and then you have to factor in as well, like, dominance, right? The Lakers didn't dominate in the same way. They had the early 2000s and the late 2000s, but completely different teams. Those Jordan teams, the core, were exactly the same. That's more dominant than I had Shaq for this first one, and then I had Pau Gasol for the second one, essentially.
That could be a debate in itself, I think. Obviously, Kobe's eras were defined by number 8 and then number 24. And I think, I guess it's just a hypothetical. When I was obviously trying to compile this list, and MJ was clearly number 1. Let's be clear here, and obviously Kobe was clearly number 2. But Kobe, I think he wanted to be number 1. Let's be clear. Kobe would have loved to be the greatest shooting guard all time, and ultimately at that point you could put him in the conversation as the greatest NBA player that had ever played. Because clearly, I guess I rate Jordan as number 1, and many would rate Jordan number 1. And I guess it came down to probably these 2 series where, when obviously he was still in the shadow of Shaq, I guess, and that loss to Detroit, and Detroit really just came together and had a hot run there. They managed to nullify Shaq through Ben Wallace, and they picked that up. They won that game. I think there was a lot of infighting as well with Karl Malone, and it's clearly an old Karl Malone too. And then obviously when Boston came along, and they obviously had Ray Allen and KG with Paul Pierce, and they obviously got that ring there, and sort of ruined that sort of 3-peat potentially that the Lakers could have strung together with Paul Gasol there as well. I think Kobe is much closer to that number 1 spot than anyone sort of really sort of thinks about.